Hi, welcome to Producer's Circle. I'm your host, Gabe Castro, and on today's episode, we are talking to producers about how they're creating content at home during our stay-at-home policy right now. So I'm joined in this virtual studio today by producer Doug Crisman. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Good to see you.
Yes. I wanted to start to introduce you to our viewers and get a little background on who you are. So Doug is the producer of a new show on PCAM called The Surprise Traveler. This is a 30-minute travel entertainment show that airs every Thursday on PCAM at 2 p.m. Doug is a retired businessman and lives in Philadelphia and has been a PCAM member for over 3 years. He enjoys collaborating with other PCAM members to help create meaningful messages to share with the Philadelphia community and beyond. And I've seen his work grow from an idea to something that is now on the channel. I know it's been a long time coming. And to see it, even now during a time when, our accessibility is a little, less. You don't have our studios, and I know you're working really hard to make your show in our studio. So why don't you tell our viewers a little bit more about your show and maybe what it looked like before the pandemic, like what you were using and how you were able to create something like that.
Okay. The pandemic probably didn't change as much for me as it did for others, possibly because I was doing my interviews for my travel show remotely. And we had set up the Express Studio with a lot of help from PCAM staff to be able to integrate a remote interview into the Express Studio format. So when I had to start doing it from home, the good news was I was already doing remote interviews, so that wasn't new to me. And in fact, it's fairly easy to do remote interviews now that you have the switching capabilities of StreamYard and Zoom and some of these other technologies. But I did very much miss the collaboration of the PCAM staff and all the help that they were able to give me directly while I was in the studio. I also, in addition to using the Express Studio, I used the audio recording room and the equipment there to do my narrations for clips that I would include in the episodes. And I collaborated a lot with different staff when I ran into problems. I still did things at home like planning and editing and script writing, so that hasn't changed much. But I've had to, overcome different challenges like everyone in terms of how to adjust my workflow and how to adjust my own approach to things so that I could still get the first episode out the door, because I was just in the process of putting the first episode in its final completion, and then to get the second episode. Now I'm working on the third. So
that's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of elements to your show, and when you're watching it, it's very interesting to kind of see the different mediums that are being thrown in there, from still images and photos of videos from your travels, as well as those interviews with people from afar. Kind of, how do you feel about is it harder, or would you say easier to get in touch with people to do virtual interviews versus when you were in the studio and everyone's lives were completely different? Was it would you say it's easier, or is it more difficult?
It's definitely more difficult, but it's very doable. I always say the enemy of the good is the obstacles that you have to overcome. And I think the first thing that I had to do was make sure that I didn't lack inspiration. And I do have a particular vision that this is one step along the way to achieve that, and also some specific goals. So I still stayed inspired, but I also had to overcome the idea of I can do this rather than I can't, rather than letting the obstacles get in the way. And I had to say, I will find a way to do these things and find things that I don't have rather than saying, I don't have them, so I can't continue. So the first thing I had to do was kind of mentally overcome those types of obstacles. And then it got a lot easier. So, I started to figure out particularly, and I think this is where PhillyCam comes into play dramatically, is that with the support of you and other staff at PhillyCam, you've had the water cooler discussions, you've had the tech discussions, you have the tutorials that have been created. And there's been help all along the way. So when I did run into an issue, once I got out of my own way, then I knew I had the people and the support that I needed when I needed it to actually continue to move on. In terms of collaboration, I have several people that I've worked with in the past that we continue to work with, via phone and text and Zoom and whatever, to work on different projects together. I work on some for them, they help me on mine, and that's continued. So I just would suggest everybody just reach out to the folks that and if there's some people you don't know but have some skills, to connect with one of you on the PhillyCam staff, and still continue to reach out, so that there really aren't any excuses anymore to say I don't have this, because you can say I don't have the money, I don't have the support, I don't have the equipment, I don't have the software. Well, there's answers to all those, and I found, in fact, I put together a presentation, if anybody would like to have access to it, that just lines out where you can get some free equipment, free software, and so on. But it's overcoming the mental obstacles first. There's nothing technically or resource-wise that isn't available to keep us from making content.
Yeah, I agree. I think something that this pandemic has shown us is that what's really important when it comes to media is the message and the stories that we're telling, whether that's to entertain or inform. And so like the quality, everyone's kind of giving everyone a little slack, right? In that, if you can create it, then you're making it. And that is what is important. And I know quite a number of our members and other creatives during this time do get caught up in like, this isn't, what I had in mind. This isn't my big dream. This isn't like the idea that I had for this project. But you can create it. And I think if you find that you really want that to get out into the world, that people are going to be patient with that and appreciate that you're putting it out there. And you can always build from there. Like you can't build unless you do it, right? Like you can't
exactly,
improve unless you have something to improve upon. So, I always suggest like small projects to kind of like bring it up in there. What are like, you said you got some help from staff. What are some like common troubleshooting things that you encountered when creating, like kind of turning your plan to being from home?
Well, I think the very first one was, well, what software is available, and you always start off with what's free. So I think my really first set of questions with PhillyCam staff was, what's available out there to do the switching that we did in the Express Studio? And that's when Roland suggested StreamYard, and some other people were using Zoom. And then I've been on some tech discussions with Philly staff that have explained more of that in depth. What do you do for audio? What do you do for, the editing? I was already using the Creative Cloud for Adobe, but I found out from PhillyCam staff that I could get it for, half the price I was spending on it just by going in there and pleading my case with Adobe. And now I get it for $19.99 instead of $29. That's all those different things have helped. So that's kind of where I started. And then it was, okay, now I've got this. How do I work out the technical kinks of how to use it? So there's tutorials that I went to. There's discussions that we had in the water cooler and with other people, PhillyCam members, as well as the staff. But I have to tell you, I've just been absolutely astounded with the amount of support that we get from PhillyCam when you see the number of staff personnel on these Zoom calls that are available there to answer any questions and to talk to us. And I would encourage many more members to start attending those types of broadcasts, because they're extremely valuable to get questions answered and keep you moving ahead. Not to mention, it's just moral support too. You find other people that are running into the same problems, and you start figuring out that you're not alone and you can get it done.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting adventure to kind of even change our PhillyCam, help desk sort of way to something that's online, right? And to support our members who are trying to create stuff at home. So we do, every Thursday have our water cooler events so that people can, talk to staff. Occasionally we'll have a tech talk where you can talk specifically with our technical staff to get support. And we also have some really great tutorials and other kind of helpful things on our blog. So if you go to phillycam.org/blog/tech, you can find those cool blogs made by PhillyCam staff, which have helped members like Doug. So for people who are like, what do I do? How do I make that? It's also kind of a new world with the way that we interact with other people, because it's all like digital, right? We don't have that in person kind of chemistry, and that's something that your show already kind of had. So like for people who are right now switching from, okay, I had in studio guests who we would like talk to each other and have this like these emotions and in connection that we relied on for this program. How or like what kind of advice would you have for like a beginner who's switching over to virtual on how to kind of keep up that energy or that connection even through a virtual screen?
Well, I think it's keep it simple. And it's kind of crazy for me to say that because I overcomplicate everything. But that's a big key. And the way that I keep it simple, even though as complex as my show is that I really only use the streaming software, the StreamYard in my case, to really just do the interviews. I don't try to use all the bells and whistles because I'm not going live. I'm doing recording. And then I use the edit room and post-production to really lay everything on top of it. And that way it keeps it real easy for my guests. It keeps it real easy for me. They get up and talk, and I keep everything very casual because I know I'm going to go in and edit it. So they don't get upset. And if something, they make a goof or something and something goes wrong, I just stop them and say, no big problem. We'll just edit that out. Let's get started again. And it makes it a lot easier because I'm inviting people. I had a couple from Canada the other day, some people from New Hampshire. I'm going to be speaking with someone from Scotland and England here next week. And some of them have experience with things like this, and some of them have never been on a thing. Although the good news is everybody's pretty much getting onto Zoom these days, or some sort of. So they're not unfamiliar with it, and they're not as uncomfortable with it as they would have been even 60 days ago. But keep it simple. And the other thing I would say is have a workflow process defined. That's been one of my big nemesises, and probably part of what I learned in the production class with you, Gabe, was making sure that you really do create a workflow, because I love to just get the idea and then go start creating it and editing it and fiddling it. But you just can't do it and stay on schedule with a TV series or something. You have to plan, write your script, get permissions, create your shot list, do the production, then do your interviews, do the post-production, get a rough cut, quality check it, get final edits, get a lot of feedback before you load up that episode by the deadline to get it to Deb, on the 7th of each month to get it out for the following month. So that's helped me tremendously. I just couldn't do it without that, and without the help of other PhillyCam members that are helping me.
Yeah,
I'll try to do it all yourself.
No. And that's, something I'm always, preaching at PhillyCam, right? Is that we're a community and we want to help each other. Right. And, you bring up some really good points in the examples of these guests that you have on is that because we're virtual, right, we now have access to people that we might not have had access to previously. So if you were just an in-studio kind of show, if you had an amazing guest potentially who's from Scotland, what are the odds that they can get all the way over here to Philadelphia? Right? But now anyone is accessible. You just kind of have to work out time differences, right? I also agree with the idea of making it simple, right? Like we're doing a lot here because I feel like we like to just be a little extra. Um, so we have a lot going on, but I mean, I'm still learning these things as we go. And it's really exciting. Like, for people who didn't see before we started recording, we were testing some things out, and Doug was helpful to me to be, like, oh, you could just do this. So,
yeah, we all learn from each other.
Yeah, it's so fun to kind of just get in here with like-minded individuals and kind of grow. And you kind of answered a bit of my question in your last answer, but maybe we can dive in a little bit more into what all goes into your pre-production process. So like you took the production planning class and you talk about some of those elements, but how much time do you think that you're taking before you ever hit record and actually like get a guest in your like studio, your virtual studio? Like what are you doing before that?
80% of the work is before I go to an interview.
Yeah.
So I don't even want to think about how many hours I spend on creating a production, but yeah, but 80% of it goes before. The interviews are almost incidental in my show because I have all these clips that I create that are played during the show. I also have to write a lot of script to create a story that we're going to tell, and then create the script, the clips around it. So the interviews are, although they represent 20% of the show, in reality, the work is really not so much in the interview. So again, if you want to keep your show simple and just really do an interview format without a lot of other bells and whistles, that's pretty straightforward to do. And with the capabilities of StreamYard, you can do it live if you don't try to get too fancy until you get really good at it. But I spend then the remainder of the time in post-production. I say 80%. It's probably more like 60% pre, 20% in the interviews, and then another 40% in post-production.
Yeah. And
but because my show is recorded, you wouldn't want to do that in a live show. You're going to have literally nothing in post-production. So you're going to have to do more planning up front so that when you do your live show, it goes, snap, snap, snap. And I also do a rehearsal with my guests.
Oh, good.
I get them to get comfortable with the equipment, check out their microphones, check out their computers, the lighting. We take about 30 minutes, a few days or a week before, get them just comfortable with it. We just chat and talk and get everybody on board. They've met each other. And then when we go to the actual taping, everybody's pretty much set. And it goes very quickly. I can do it in about an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's definitely something that, one of our all-star staff members who's always here to help, Roland Boyden, is always talking to your guests beforehand. He even says that he will use Zoom to have a conversation with his guests to kind of plot out, like, let's go over how it works, but also to work with them to find, like, where's the best lighting in your house? Like, what place is not super noisy? How can we minimize, like, any reverb and all of that? So, like, he'll go into depth for that so that when it comes to recording, people are super comfortable. He's getting the quality that he wants. Like, because, I mean, when you have guests, you can't control what they have, right? Like what technology or equipment they're bringing. So, for example, one of the guests that we were supposed to have today, and hopefully we'll get to talk to sometime, uses his phone. So Stuart Brodian, producer of Brodian's Basement, uses his phone to record his programs, and then he sends the video file to his editor, who then will put all the bells and whistles together, right? But there's like extra steps there where you want to kind of talk and make sure that people have the ability to kind of control, or at least the things that they can control, that we're like, moving those to get better lighting and sound. Yeah. And if you can do that, it really doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter that you guys are virtual. The content is still there. The quality is still there.
Right. And again, with the quality issue, Gabe, you look at national television stations. They run into people with poor internet connections, bad audio. They just have to work their way through it. They're struggling with it as well. So it isn't like anybody would, you wouldn't want to say, well, I'm not going to do my production because it's not going to be as good enough quality, because everyone's dealing with that, and the viewing public is getting used to it. So that shouldn't hold anybody back from going ahead and giving it a try. And if you really run into problems, you can abort. There's been some famous examples of that lately. Or you can record and play it later and cut that out. I've had it go bad on me, and I stopped it, and then a little bit later we got a better connection and we started up again, and so we just handled it that way. But we went ahead with the rest of the show, and the other people weren't having any problems. But there's a lot of ways around this, and it gets back to the first thing I said. You've got to decide that you want to do this, and that there's some content that you have that you're inspired enough to communicate, that you spend and take the effort to go ahead and find the ways to make it happen, instead of finding the excuses as to why it can't happen.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, that's often the barrier and the obstacle that most producers find, even when they start out at PCAM, when we're fully running, right? That's a common thing, is we have these really, really big expectations, and we kind of don't give ourselves enough credit for what we can create, right? And we get caught up in our own head. I know I do that too. Yep. So it is really about, giving yourself kind of the space to make mistakes and to learn and to just give it a shot. And like you said, the playing field is kind of even, right? Like, right. There was Saturday Night Live, the opening was like Kristen Wiig's phone. She just recorded her, opening from her phone, and that was awesome.
Right. Exactly.
And so everyone's doing it. So it's like, why not give it a try? And if you have the capability and the emotional wherewithal during this time to do that, then you should. And then I also, before we kind of get into last thoughts here, just also want to say that for anyone who feels immense pressure to do things when you really don't want to do things, like if you want to break and you want to just take this time to be with family or to just kind of keep your sanity, then definitely do that. Like, there's no pressure, there's no right or wrong way to be handling this pandemic. But if creating content has always been like an escape for you, or something that you've loved and enjoyed, and you are afraid of what it'll look like, or you're kind of putting yourself down that it's not going to be what you think, then I don't think that should be the excuse. And if that is, then give us a call at PCAM, give us a shout out, an email, or join us at a water cooler, and we'll help you get over that and create content like that. So Doug, if you could tell our viewers a little bit about your show, when it's on. I know I said it at the beginning, and then if you have any last thoughts.
Okay. Well, I'm just having a blast doing my show. It's really a travel entertainment show that's focused on the unexpected surprises that we run into when we did travels around the world. And I've had the good fortune of being, prior to the pandemic, to being able to take these opportunities. And I was always shooting a lot of video. So I put these things together, and I found guests from the past that are helping me by coming on the show, talking about it, and then introducing me to other folks that are experts in different countries on different parts. And we're kind of coming up with a whole bunch of surprises that you don't expect. We cover some of the normal things you'd see in a travel show, but typically we get more focused on the things you wouldn't expect to see, and also we're starting to get into telling some stories about different elements of more depth to give you a feeling of a country that you wouldn't have necessarily heard anywhere else. So it's a lot of fun. It's 30 minutes long. It's on Thursdays at 2:00. And once the episodes have run, I also have a YouTube channel called The Surprise Traveler. And we have our own website at thesurprisetraveler.com. And also a Instagram account. So there's a lot of different ways you can see previews of the upcoming episodes. And if you're ever wondering what I'm doing, I'm right here where you see me right now, working on the next episode, and then the next episode, and the next episode. My final thoughts in terms of Yeah, we do all get down. In fact, probably myself as much as anybody, I can go through kind of down moods, and I don't really want to do anything and get into inaction. But when I run into that, what I typically do is try to find something fun that has to do and is related to what I'm doing, but it's the fun things that I like to do rather than the stuff I don't like to do. And so I'll
Yeah.
just go play on some of the fun things, like maybe I'm just really blocked on the script or something that's not one of my strongest suits, and instead I'll just go and edit on a clip or something I'd really like to do. To me, that's fun, but I find something that's fun, or create a template, or just relax and watch a film or something, or a video that I think will give me some insights into maybe the kinds of things that I'm doing. But just anything to, or I talk to one of my collaborators and kind of use them to help cheer me up. So that's but just don't let it stop you. Inaction breeds inaction, and action breeds action. So if you just take small steps and have some fun, you'll eventually get back into the swing of things and get past your little burnout and move on. And I think the other thing is inspiration. I do have a vision. Ultimately, I want to be able to create a documentary that will help our communities understand mental illness better and treat it with medical support rather than incarceration and judicial approaches. And I think that's a big deal. That's personally touched members of my family. And this TV show is my first step to doing that, because I felt that by learning how to do this would equip me with all the skills and the resources and the support teams and everything that I needed to eventually take on that kind of an action to create this documentary, which would hopefully start moving some people to make some legislation to change the laws around the way we treat mental illness. So there's a bigger vision, and I always go back to that bigger vision, and that inspires me, and I try to use that to inspire others to help me.
It's all really great and amazing advice. It is a really good idea to kind of do those things that you like. I'm so happy that you said that because it does help, when you're just like, I really love when I, if you're doing film analysis, like my show, I will be like, let's watch something, like let's do that. And that'll, inspire me to think, or most of the time I'm shouting my ideas at Jeff. So then I'm like, here's what my idea is. Yeah, so if you have those like outlets, or those things that you enjoy, it could get you pumped up. And using something like this to keep you going and to learn and build your skills so that you can tackle that big project totally makes sense. So for people who are like, I want to make a film, right? Like maybe start with a short that you care about, but not like your whole heart is in, like it's your baby. And then you'll grow and learn. I want to one last time plug our phillycam.org/blog/tech for people who want to create content at home. We also, if you go to this phillycam.org/blog, you will find a new blog there that is featuring 11 of our producers of TV and radio who are creating content at home. There's also another episode of Producer Circle featuring radio producers who are creating content at home, which is super interesting, the ways that they're doing that, because you would never imagine, we're all getting very creative and very informative. So make sure you check out phillycam.org, and you definitely check out Doug's show. It's a really good escape right now, because we can't all go on a trip to Africa, but we can watch and get surprised alongside Doug and his guests. So thanks again, Doug, for joining me in the virtual studio and giving us your amazing thoughts and helpful tips and tricks for creating content.
Don't forget that I would have never done the Surprise Traveler if you hadn't have pushed me into it.
That's my job, to get you to do it. So
I thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And that is our episode of Producer Circle.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.